Welcome, everyone, to Three Side Sports Talk. Todd Kleinheinz, Jeff Krupinski, and Jerry Sue with you again. Excited to be joined by two guys who did not have to freeze last week when they were in Utah. And now that I'm back in California, it is no wonder why there's so many people that live here, because just getting off the plane from that 20-degree atmosphere or that 20-degree weather just was so joyous. So I'm back in California, and I'm ready to go because even the slow football season isn't slow. And I mean, we might have to discuss moving this podcast because every single week we finish a podcast, the next morning, breaking news. So we'll jump right into it. Carson Wentz from the Eagles to the Colts for a second-round draft pick this year and a conditional pick that, in my mind, I think could pretty easily become a first-round draft pick. So, Jerry, Wentz changes teams. Your thoughts?
Well, so as shocking as it was to hear that Matt Stafford got traded to the Rams, it was definitely not as surprising when Carson Wentz got dealt to the Colts. In fact, it was kind of inevitable, really, when you think about it. The Colts still needed a quarterback after missing out on Stafford. And they only gave up, I think it's a third, right? Not a second, but a third and a conditional second, which can become a first, to acquire Wentz, who did have a successful track record with Frank Reich during their time together in Philly. And the Colts had the available cap space to absorb his sizable contract. So this allowed the Eagles to basically salvage at least some value from a messy situation. But the big winner, and we're talking winner, chicken dinner, is Carson Wentz. I mean, dang lang, the dude wanted out of Philly, did not want to go to Chicago, only had eyes for Indy, and he got everything he wanted. So, Todd, here you go. Here is your example of a quarterback still in his prime who just years ago, hold on, was playing at an MVP level. Not only got his wish to be traded, but he was also sent to his preferred destination. Right?
No, absolutely 100% factually incorrect. The guy was the worst statistical quarterback last year. If that's your prime, if that's as high as you can go as the worst starting quarterback in the NFL, that means everything else is going to be trash from here on out. So no, he was not in his prime. Does he have flashes and ability? Of course, which is why they've traded a third rounder, like you said, plus what could be a first rounder, because all he's got to do is play. If he plays 75% of the snaps or 70% of the snaps, plus they make the playoffs, it becomes a first round draft pick. So that seems to be, if he plays and they win, it's a first rounder. So did he want out? Yeah, but you know what? The Eagles wanted him out equally as much. I mean, that was clear as day. So to try and compare this to Deshaun Watson of, a quarterback in his prime wants out and got what he wanted. No, the Eagles wanted him out. They wanted to get rid of his salary, which is why they had to take what they could get. So, and we only heard two teams who were even a little bit interested, and that being the Bears and the Colts. So the fact that he went to the Colts isn't, I want to go to the Colts. It's not like there was so many people pounding down the Eagles' door trying to trade for him. So did he get what he wanted? Sure. But to try and equate it to in his prime, young quarterback gets what he wants, that's selling a narrative that's not even close.
Well, let me just jump in and say that, okay, let's back up. In his prime, in his age maybe prime, he gets to go to another team. In his ability, he had a good year, and then all of a sudden, like Todd said, now he's the worst statistical quarterback in the league. So can he get better with Frank? Sure. He can only get better, right? And especially going to a team like the Colts, who are like really, a good team on the cusp of winning. So yes, to your point, Jerry, yeah, he got what he wanted, to go to a really good team and kind of mask some of his flaws and maybe improve himself with Frank. And yes, he's in his prime age years, but he does have a lot to prove at this point.
So of course I'm going to completely disagree with Todd. Shocking. I mean, I will acknowledge, yes, Wentz had the worst year of his career in 2020, though he still beat the Niners, by the way. But look at his stats from 2017 to 2019. They're actually pretty good. And as far as his age, as Jeff said, he is still in his prime. But you want to call him damaged good, that's fine. I mean, my point is, though, that Wentz still got everything he wanted.
Okay,
and nobody's saying that trading a franchise quarterback in his prime is desirable. But as we've discussed ad nauseum, as far as the Texans were concerned, they went FUBAR on their relationship with Deshaun. So he's done. And when it's done, it's done.
Well,
just like the situation between the Eagles and Wentz. I mean, you think Philly wanted to give up on a guy who they previously traded a truckload of draft picks for to move up in the draft in 2016 to select? And not only that, but now they're only getting a couple of mid-round picks in return, and they're eating hold on. They're eating $33 million in cap space when they've already got horrendous cap issues.
Dude,
I'm sure that's not what they wanted.
Dude, you cannot bend the truth anymore. Oh my, couple mid-round picks. First of all, third round, fine, mid-round. We just talked about it could be a first rounder.
It could be.
But all he has to do is play. So if he plays, it's a first rounder. If he doesn't play, then it comes to fruition that he's a garbage quarterback. So that he's either gonna be good and get that first round draft pick, or he's going to be bad. And then there's your two mid-round picks. So, and let me ask you this. Do you want the Niners to trade for Carson Wentz?
Not for the contract that he currently has, no.
Exactly.
But it's a contract situation.
Exactly, which is why the Eagles wanted out of it. And to say like the Eagles just drafted a quarterback in the second round last year, and they gave him the starting job and they wouldn't give it back to Wentz. Like the Eagles were ready to move on. They were ready to move on. Like it's not Deshaun where the Texans are like, no, we don't want, but it's causing such a problem we have to. Did you hear anyone in Philadelphia say, nah, we're not moving Carson. He's our guy. No.
Yeah, they were ready to move on into their benefit or whatever. They were able to get out of it and they were able to just move on. So that
maybe I'm not on board with the Philly was ready to move on and wanted to move on because they got rid of Doug Peterson. And the whole narrative was that they got rid of Doug Peterson because they wanted to keep Carson Wentz.
Right, but you don't think the ownership signed off on trading Carson Wentz? I mean,
well, ultimately, and that's my whole point.
Right,
was
so
that they finally said, "Hey, okay, the situation's untenable." Right, so while Philly swallowed their pride and made the best out of a bad situation by moving on, Houston is still telling Deshaun Watson they don't give a crap how unhappy he is because, as far as they're concerned, what's the saying that the Texans like to use? Oh yeah. They can't let the inmates run the prison. And it doesn't get any more disrespectful than that.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we're even comparing, apples to apples, right? Like, right, Todd? I mean, he's not Deshaun.
No, not entirely. And I'm not saying that.
Probably worse. I don't know if we need to compare the two. It was clear they were moving on because they already gave the job to Jalen and they brought in a new coach who must have said, I want Jalen. So.
Okay, hold on. You think that Jalen's their starting quarterback? Absolutely. Yeah. They're not drafting a quarterback.
No.
Okay, well, that's where I will also disagree with you.
Right?
Like at this point, yeah, I think he's a quarterback.
But that's even more reason why it was clear the Eagles didn't want. The Eagles were not going to fire their coach and 3 weeks later trade their franchise quarterback without ownership and the coaches and the GM having this plan. You think they just fired Doug Peterson? Okay, good. We got Carson and go. Oh no, now we got to trade him. No, they moved him out of there. They hired their new coach and here's the plan.
But they're still going to take a pretty good cap hit, right?
That's what I'm saying. I fully
but they're willing to just eat that though and move on.
I fully don't believe that their initial plan was let's just clear the deck. Let's just clear the deck, get rid of Doug Peterson, and get rid of Carson Wentz. I think they sided with Carson. They wanted Carson to come back, but Carson wasn't just upset at Doug Peterson, as they later found out, but he's pretty miffed that they also drafted Jalen Hurts, which ultimately was like, for him, he's like, I'm out. It doesn't matter who you hire as a coach. But I think that they got rid of Doug Peterson because they thought that the reason why Carson Wentz didn't want to play there was because of Peterson, which then they later on found out that wasn't entirely the case, which is why you're saying your argument is that they were going to clear the decks regardless. But I don't think that.
My argument is you don't think somebody had a conversation with Wentz before they fired Doug Peterson?
I'm not sure what went on, but it all doesn't seem right.
If that's the plan, how does GM, president, ownership not have a conversation with Carson Wentz and say, Carson, we're letting Doug go, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, isn't Carson either going, that's great, I'm so happy, can't wait to be wearing my Philly uniform again, or that's great, but it really isn't my issue here. I mean, then it's an organizational failure, which puts them in rarefied air with the Texans if they're saying, we made these decisions without consulting the main stakeholders.
Right. Or maybe they did and they just didn't buy into it. Just like the way Houston's telling, Deshaun, hey, look, we've done all these things. We want you back. It's like, I'm not coming back. Right. So, but again, the difference is that Philly owned their mistake and they're moving on.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, moving on and owning their mistake and making that decision is going with it. Whereas the Texans they're still in that position where we have a franchise quarterback, top 5 quarterback in the league. We're not just going to walk away from this guy or this contract that really isn't that bad. So I think there's a big difference in the two, because I think the Eagles had Jalen, so they said, we want to move on. I mean, whether we could argue about that, we'll never know all the information, right? The new coach could have said, yeah, I'm fine with Jalen, even though you think they're going to take a quarterback. But I think, they're fine with Jalen and we can get rid of Carson, and what we saw from him last year, we don't have to worry about that anymore, and move on with Jalen.
Oh, I hear both of your arguments, and I understand where you guys are coming from, but I still think that it's just, there's clearly something off in Houston where they have kind of a similar situation, not entirely the same, I'll grant you that, but similar situation. And they're not giving Deshaun Watson the same respect that I've seen Detroit now gives Matthew Stafford and Philadelphia give Carson Wentz.
Well, to touch on that really quick, J.J. Watt even said he spoke with ownership. So maybe Deshaun hasn't spoken with them. Maybe he's doing himself a disservice. Maybe he needs to go talk to them, have that man-to-man conversation and say, listen, I am not playing here. Release me or trade me or whatever the situation is. And if he's not doing that, then okay, then Houston's going to say, we're not going to trade you. I mean, he needs to have that conversation. I think we've talked about that before.
Yeah. And again, I can't even see it. I can't even say it's similar anywhere near the ballpark, because the trade assets, the value is nothing. I mean, there's nothing similar to not only the trade pieces that would go for back to Watson, which is nowhere near what Wentz got, nowhere near what Stafford got. It's a lot easier to part with a 3rd rounder and a conditional 2nd rounder for a team that has no quarterback. Talking about the Colts, they have no quarterback under contract. So to trade a 3rd this year and what could be a 1st rounder is pennies on the dollar for a guy who has shown ability.
And for a reclamation project for Frank Reich, yeah.
And if Deshaun gets traded, he's going to get 3 times that amount in trade. The Texans will get in trade return. So it's not
exactly. So do it.
I'm not the Texans.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But they're not, right? The fact of the matter is, owner Cal McNair, or Tommy Boy, as he's known in that organization, has completely screwed the Texans by not keeping his promises to Deshaun, right? And I guess he can remain stubborn and try to call Deshaun's bluff about sitting out the entire season, but all the Texans are doing, they're just prolonging the inevitable, because I'm convinced that Deshaun will never play for Houston again. So just like Philly did with Wentz, the Texans should just make the best out of a bad situation and move on. Go get that bounty of assets for Deshaun and use those assets to rebuild and start improving the direction of your franchise. That's all I'm saying.
No one says that that's
still may come.
No, but they're not doing that.
But you're making it sound like that's the only direction they have. That's one direction. That's if you want to cut bait on this guy and move forward.
It takes two to tango, and it doesn't look like Deshaun's coming back.
Absolutely. How come? Because he hasn't done anything. He hasn't met with management or ownership or the GM or answered a phone call. So, I mean, what are the Texans supposed to do? I mean, just take the media's word for it that, have the conversation. And then at that point, give us your list of 5 teams and we're going to solicit those teams for the best offer. But for him to remain radio silent and just have these things come out via his agent of, I'm not playing here. That's
what I mean. Like if he hasn't done that,
him a service.
Well, maybe that's just how he operates. Because there's something that I heard in the last week about how, given the experience that he had with his mom and seeing how his mom handled it when she had cancer, that she always remained very steady and stoic, and that's just how he wants to go about his business. And maybe he doesn't want to confront such confrontation, and that's why he has representation. That's why he has agents. And maybe, you're saying that they haven't communicated with Houston, or Deshaun hasn't directly. We don't really know that entirely.
Right.
We know that because that's what the media is saying, because they don't know, but we don't know. And we definitely don't know. I mean, I can't imagine that Deshaun's representation hasn't gone to the Houston Texans and told them that he's not coming back.
Well, that's the thing. We don't know, but if we don't know, all we can do is speculate, right? But his management, but I think also he, being the face of the franchise, making all that money, needs to go talk to them, regardless of how stoic and quiet he wants to be. He needs to go talk to them and say, listen, this is what I'm thinking.
Absolutely.
He can't be quiet about it, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a situation that obviously will continue to evolve until someone of status in the Texans organization comes forward and has a press conference or put something on the record that what they're doing, or Deshaun or his agent come forward and put their name on something that this is what we want. So until then, it is a lot of speculation. But that there's nothing wrong with speculating if there's no facts to it. All you can do is read the tea leaves, which is what we try and do. And before we move on, I just want to first thank everyone who sent in questions for our mailbag segment coming up in just a little while. It's exciting and interesting to get questions from people and try and see what their point of views are. And so just as a reminder, if you want to leave questions in a review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform of your choosing, we'll put those together into mailbag segments in the future. Also, if you want to follow us on Twitter at 3Side Sports, you can do that. But let's put Deshaun to rest just for a minute and move on to another quarterback, Jeff's, darling, that being Sam Darnold. Not that any news has come out necessarily about Sam Darnold, but looking at the NFL calendar with free agency starting on March 17th, that kind of being the starting point for when things really might kick into action, or we were thinking might kick into action. I think a real problem is going to be the Jets need to do their due diligence about not only Darnold, but the quarterbacks coming up. And they're not going to be able to do that until Fields, Wilson, and Trey Lance all have their pro days. And Trey Lance, March 12th. Zach Wilson, March 26th. Justin Fields, March 30th. So if there's going to be any news on Sam Darnold moving or staying, you got to think it's not going to be until the Jets really go through this whole process. And we're not going to have that until Justin Fields' pro day on March 30th. That's going to put you about 2 weeks into free agency. So we've been talking about the Niners possibly looking to, if they're not going to go after Deshaun, bringing in a new quarterback. But I think that throws a wrench into the Sam Darnold situation, for anyone who either wanted Sam Darnold or was against Sam Darnold, that I don't think there's going to be any, answers, because the Jets have to go through their process. So thoughts on that, because again, we're talking about for me, it's pointing more and more likely that Jimmy is the starting quarterback, come September.
Yeah, and I was thinking that earlier when we were having these discussions about Deshaun, because even though Jerry thinks we should go get him, I still think we're not going to go get him. He may go somewhere else, but I just don't think we're going to be getting him. And I don't know if we're going to be getting anybody like Darnold. So it brings me back to your question. I think we're probably going to stick with Jimmy, whether they draft somebody 12 or in the second, possibly. But that's just what I'm thinking right now. I mean, obviously it's because there's not a lot of news in the news cycle, there's not a lot of rumors happening. Until that happens, or we get some report from Schefter or from one of these local beat writers, we're not really hearing much. But I would say, yeah, we're going to stick with Jimmy. And, I guess the Jets, I mean, you never know. They could stick with Darnold and then still draft a quarterback and then dangle him to some other team that doesn't have one available. So who knows what the timeline is on that. So we might be waiting a while. I mean, you're right. That's a long ways to wait for a pro day. But yeah, I'm guessing that's my thought right now is we're sticking with Jimmy at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I still think that it's going to either be Deshaun or Jimmy. That's the way I'm looking at it right now. As far as Darnold or the calendar of events that you're referring to, I just think that so much in the air. Sorry, that sounded terrible. So much is still in the air that I think things can still take place later on. I know that you're worried about free agency and how well, because of the late days of the pro days, it gets into free agency. I don't know if that really matters this offseason. I think we're going to see that people are still going to be needing quarterbacks even during the draft. I think there could be even more wheeling and dealing during that time frame.
Well, I will say I'm not worried about it, because the longer the Jets have to hang on to Darnold, the better, because I'm not a Sam Darnold fan. And if it's Sam Darnold or Jimmy, I'd rather run it back with Jimmy. If there's other segments that would facilitate a trade, none of that seems to be benefiting the Niners. If it seems to be the Jets, trading, maybe the Niners picking up the Jets, later first round pick in exchange for their 12 and getting Darnold, or some combination of that. So the longer that the Jets hang on to Darnold, the better for me, because it would seem to indicate he's not coming to San Francisco, which, again, I'm in favor of keeping him on the East Coast.
So I thought about this recently. I'm not sure how it came to mind, but would you ever make any sort of comparison between Sam Darnold and Steve Young? And hold on before you answer. And I thought of this because remember when the Niners traded for Steve Young from Tampa, Steve was not good. I mean, if you look back at his statistics, they're actually very Darnold-esque, and it did take him a while. I mean, he sat for a good 4 to 5 years behind Joe. So I guess the reason why I'm bringing it up is that I'm wondering, is Sam Darnold really a lost cause in your mind? And if not, is there any chance he still has something left to show and to prove, given what we've seen of, I don't want to say identical or similar type quarterback, because they're not. I mean, obviously Steve was a lot more athletic. I mean, more of a runner than Sam Darnold, but you know what I mean, where he's still young. He wasn't in a good situation, much like Steve wasn't in Tampa. Is there still an opportunity for Sam Darnold to develop beyond what we have seen if he did go to the Niners?
I would say it's not a crazy comparison. My rebuttal for that would be that even after college, we saw Steve Young in the USFL be very successful. And then he went to Tampa Bay and was not successful, which would seem to indicate he was a product of a bad system being in Tampa Bay.
But what if what if Sam Darnold played in, I don't know, one of these other offshoot leagues like the XFL whatever, or the
Well,
AFL or whatever the last, you know what I mean? Like, would
that's
he
what
have
I'm
thrived? I mean, would that have been a similar situation?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is we haven't seen Darnold succeed beyond the college years. But I agree. I don't think he's a lost cause. I think in the proper system with good coaching, he could still be a good quarterback. That being said, I don't want him on the Niners because I envision the Niners window open right now. So in order to have Darnold come in, you would almost think there's a 2-year period, much like Matt Ryan had with Shanahan. It's this getting over the hump, learning the system, getting everything down, and then being good if you're gonna be good in that second year. So that's why I would see. I agree. Yes, Darnold could very well be a Steve Young for some other team if he came in, sat, learned, and kind of opened up the window to their winning ways, opposed to the Niners, whose window is open. And I don't want to take 2 years of having him come in, learn, and then hope that he's good.
Well, he may be salvageable, but I guess the same thing can be said for someone like Rosen, right? Neither one of them has had an opportunity to really show what they've done. Maybe Darnold, to Todd's point, could be maybe somebody to go to Pittsburgh and learn behind Roethlisberger for a year, maybe learn that system. Maybe that's where he could be more successful. But that's, again, why maybe we should have been able to get someone like Stafford, like Todd was just saying about, let's say, Ryan. You come in, learn the system, get over that initial hump, and he's an upgrade. Possibly, but not necessarily with Darnold. I mean, one thing with Darnold is, I don't know if you guys remember this, like he was seeing ghosts out there. So I don't know if he can really come into our system and figure it out. I mean, I'm not sure if Steve Young had that same situation like that, but.
I don't remember those Tampa Bay games. I wouldn't be surprised though if he was seeing ghosts behind that offensive line.
True.
I
thought that was funny, but
no, it's absolutely right. But again, it's your favorite team, Jeff, or I guess the Browns are your favorite team, so that makes the Jets your second favorite team. But I mean, when you're in that organization, it's just a dysfunctional organization and hasn't been good, and they've been lousy, and they draft a young quarterback and they throw him in right away and all this kind of stuff. Him producing, the percentage, the chances of him producing right away are just so slim, which is why I wouldn't give up on Darnold, whether on the Jets or a team who, is kind of putting the pieces together over the next 2 years to try and salvage him. Or like Jeff said, if you're Pittsburgh and you can bring Darnold in and you can get Ben to, take a drastic pay cut and he can kind of get into that type of system, that would be optimal for him. But to try and take him and put him right into a new system, I don't think you're doing him any favors, and you're putting an awful lot of faith in a guy who hasn't produced beyond his college years.
Or the Jets can keep Darnold, and then we can give them number 12 and maybe another one, and then we can move up and take Zach Wilson too. That's an option.
That is an option.
Right.
And it's the type of option that you got to think the Niners are considering if they're talking about Deshaun. If the price of Deshaun is, let's just say, 2 1s and 2 2s and Eric Armstead or something, like some kind of package, is that package would get you, let's say that package gets you Deshaun, let's say 12 this year and a 1 next year, get you up into the top 3. Would yes, you're rolling the dice on getting Zach Wilson, but you're not paying as much.
Right.
So
you're not paying as much, but you're also not getting.
You're exactly.
The more certain bet.
Absolutely. I mean, which
rolling the dice, but giving up half and not the salary too.
So for me, I'm a little more conservative, so I would be more inclined to go with Deshaun because it's a product I know I'm going to get, or a product I know that is already been successful. Whereas half as much for a roll of the dice, that's tough. You're going to put a lot of money down on the craps line in Vegas and have one roll at it. Yeah. Hey, you might be in the penthouse that night, but you also might be, sleeping in the car type thing. So for a gambling man, for somebody who's willing to make that risk, I could see them, having those discussions, all of this or half of this. So anyways, I want to jump into our mailbag questions, just because not only I want to give some credit to the people who have been listening and tossed out questions our direction, but a couple of them made me laugh. And also we went international, so that's huge. So, but I'm going to start local here in the Bay Area. Mike in Gilroy, in your 3 somewhat professional opinions, I think that's kind of a jab.
Yeah.
But we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Who is untouchable if the Niners were to trade for Deshaun?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we already touched on it a little bit with Bosa, right? I mean, to me, Bosa, but then again, is anybody untouchable? But yeah, I mean, to me, I wouldn't want to give up Bosa or Warner or Kittle.
Right.
I think maybe those 3.
Jerry?
I'm sorry, who were your 3? Bosa, Kittle, and
Warner.
Gotcha. I got 3. Got Bosa, Kittle, and Steve Risser. Yeah, that said it. Definitely. Steve Risser. For those who don't know, Steve Risser is the Niners director of team logistics. So he's in charge of their travel arrangements and dealt with all the craziness with aplomb this past season in terms of moving the team to Arizona for the second half of the season due to the pandemic. So I wouldn't trust anybody other than Steve to make sure Deshaun arrives at 49 Centennial safe.
He'll take care of it, I'm sure.
Right.
But yeah, Bosa and Kittle, absolutely.
And I'm on the fence with Bosa. I keep going back and forth. I think Kittle is not only the face of the franchise type of player and the motivator and the guy who everyone rallies around, but you're talking about Deshaun Watson. So untouchable. I would say Kittle is untouchable. I would say Nick Bosa he's pretty close to untouchable, but I'm not hanging up the phone if that's their starting point. If their starting point is draft picks and Nick Bosa, I'm not directly hanging up.
Not directly hanging up, but aren't you the one that said, was it last week or right Super Bowl, said, what's the pass rush to do?
Right.
So,
which is why I'm not slamming the phone down, but it's going to take them, negotiating enough to make me want to make that trade. So,
I mean, dominant pass rushers are so rare and so invaluable. And when you say untouchables, that's what I think of. I mean, right? I think of tone setters who the players on the team will all follow, and those who completely embody what the team stands for. And to me, that's Kittle and Bosa.
Yeah.
Like if you could only pick 2 players to be the captain of your team, would those not be the 2 players?
Pretty close.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Well, yeah.
So.
All right. Well, thanks. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Next one's from Chris. Although we're in the same division, the Seahawks seem to be shopping Wilson and possibly looking for 3 first-rounders. Any chance the Niners get them? And then his second question is, who's the top under the radar prospect for the Niners in the draft? I think this first one will be pretty quick. Any chance Seahawks would trade Wilson to the Niners?
Absolutely not. Even if the rumors were real, there's no that they're shopping him. There's no way that the Niners and Seahawks strike a deal. I mean, I've largely ignored all the Russell Wilson noise because I think it's just that. It's just noise. And it's just Wilson's way of getting Seattle's attention, showing how valuable he is and trying to get them to focus on what he wants them to do, which is, I don't know, I'm guessing getting him more protection and more weapons. But at the end of the day, I don't see Seattle trading him this offseason. But I guess, I don't know, if John Schneider and Pete Carroll went Randolph and Mortimer Duke and thought it would be fun to make a bet and see if they could trade Wilson and make a championship quarterback out of a free agent like, I don't know, Mitch Trubisky. I guess they could get a similar haul like the one that Houston will get with Deshaun.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I agree with what you said, Jerry. I'm not really paying much attention to the noise because I think he's just trying to get help or trying to get better offensive line play or a better stable of running backs. But yeah, they're not. He's not being traded, and he's definitely not being traded to the Niners. I still think maybe Houston could be in play for a trade, right? I mean, they'd get a lot better quarterback than if they traded us for Jimmy G. So, I mean, I can see that happening.
I don't think Russell Wilson's signing off and going to that dumpster.
No, right. He's not going to approve that, right?
Yeah.
As for his second question, any under the radar draft prospects for the Niners? For myself, I haven't really dove into what might be under the radar prospects, but I will say it won't surprise me, and not that I have a player in mind, it won't surprise me if they take another tight end somewhat early. And I'm talking like in the top 2-3 rounds, because Shanahan loves his tight ends. If in fact they do lose Kyle Juszczyk, that's kind of a Swiss Army knife type thing. And the fullback is a dying breed. The Mason out of Michigan seems to be the best fullback, but he's your old time Lorenzo Neal fullback, where he's more of a open in holes, not so much the Swiss Army knife. So if you're talking under the radar position, I think tight end might be a position that that they might lean towards if the dominoes fall that Juszczyk leaves and there just isn't a guy that they really like, in that second or third round.
Yeah, Ben Mason out of Michigan, 6'3", 254-pound fullback. I had him sort of in mind as well. I still think that he would definitely fit the Shanahan system, even though he's more like your Tom Rathman than your Kyle Juszczyk. He's tough, gritty, old school fullback. Trey Smith, I'm not sure if I mentioned him in a previous podcast before, but he's your offensive lineman out of Tennessee. 6'6", 330-pound mauler in the run game, stout against the pass rush, would be great in Shanahan's zone blocking scheme, maybe a third or fourth rounder type. Another Smith, Jordan Smith out of the University of Alabama, Birmingham, 6'6", 255-pound, I guess defensive end or 3-4 outside linebacker. He's tall, long, rangy, great athleticism, looked good at the Senior Bowl. So I could see him going about, maybe in the fifth round. And then here's a name that might sound familiar. Last name's Warner, Troy Warner, younger brother of Fred Warner. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, safety out of BYU, had some injury issues in the past, but finished out his senior year strong. So I think him and Mason are probably more like your 6th, 7th rounders of day 3. I would say those would be my sort of under the radar guys.
Yeah, it's hard to say under the radar because, most of the guys they may go get, whether it's that guy, Quinn Miners or what was his name? Yeah, or another one of those guys from Alabama, one of these guards. These are positions of need. So, but like you said, I've seen him linked to even taking a tight end in the first round. I've seen that somewhere in a mock draft. So I think tight end or, Swiss Army knife player. I don't have enough, deep dive, knowledge like you do as far as listing names and heights and weights at this point. So they have their positions of need, but then definitely I can see them adding, another tight end because they love the tight end. So.
Next question comes from MDK. He might have a relationship to someone on this panel because he says, why is Jeff's younger brother so much better looking than he is? So shots fired, apparently.
Yeah.
And then he talks about free agents, and we've talked about free agents a lot. So I'm going to kind of maybe parse his question down to, outside of Trent Williams, is there one free agent that you think should be at the top of the Niners list?
I don't know if that first question is really appropriate for this show. I'm not sure about that. And I don't know if that's even a true question. I don't know how to answer that necessarily. As far as the other question, I think, someone like Verrett has to be up there, right? Because if we definitely are going to lose Sherman, re-signing a Verrett who really came along, and if we're able to keep E-Man, at least we have 2 somewhat decent guys that have been in our system. whether we go add another guy in the first or second, or we're going to need to add some other guys in free agency or the draft, but at least we'd have two guys that are knowledgeable of the system that we can easily plug into those two outside corner spots.
Well, so have you guys seen the movie Despicable Me? Like, you know that movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I could see John Lynch in the role of Gru talking to the Minion Niner fans and saying something like, now I know there have been some rumors that the NFL has blasted the salary cap with the shrink ray, and those rumors are true. In terms of money, we have no money. So how will we sign any free agents? So as ugly as my impression of Gru was, is as ugly as I think the Niners cap situation stands. So you guys talked about some of the players that the Niners will want to retain. Obviously the Trent Williams, the Kyle Juszczyks, the Jason Verrett's, the Emmanuel Mosleys, and I hope they could do that. I think they should be able, but as far as free agents from other teams, I think it's going to be tough. I mean, we've heard that there could be a mutual interest between the Niners and Alex Mack. I mean, I guess that might happen, and that would definitely shore up our center position if it did. But I think that we'll just have to wait to see which players lose out on the big money when the market dries up, and they see who's willing to settle for those 1-year prove-it deals. I think that's the only kind of contracts that the Niners are likely able to afford when it comes to outside free agents. So, sorry, I guess I don't know if that's a kind of a cop-out answer, but I don't even know who they can afford.
Yeah.
Well, and the salary cap hasn't been set yet, although, you know, it's at minimum 180. You know, we were under the impression it might even be down to 175. It's at minimum 180, not above 185. So you're looking at the low 180s range. And, you know, that still puts the Niners, even currently, before, you know, cutting Richburg and, you know, even either cutting or renegotiating Jimmy's contract, kind of right in the middle. So I don't think they're completely out of the woods. My problem is that the guys that they would most, or I would want them to most retain, your Emmanuel Mosleys, your K'Wan Williams guys, are going to be prime targets for the Jets. I mean, Saleh's going to want to, you know, build a roster with guys he knows. And they got a ton of money. So trying to outbid the Jets is kind of the thing that is worrisome for me, that they're not going to be able to sign these guys to market deals, because the Jets could very well, you know, overpay at least to get some of these guys. But I'm with Jeff. If it's not Verrett, it's got to be one of their corners. It's got to be Verrett would be number one, but Emmanuel Mosley and K'Wan Williams are right there in terms of, you know, needing to be prioritized to bring back, because the whole secondary is basically up for grabs, and trying to, as much as a healthy Nick Bosa will help cover up some of those warts, if we do have to go with a young, inexperienced secondary, it's still not going to be, you know, a great idea to have to redo everybody. So,
and, you know, going along those lines, an argument to not trade for Deshaun, or not even, or to even stick with Jimmy, is that perhaps the Niners, you know, it'd be very interesting to hear what they're talking about in their boardroom between Lynch and Shanahan and all those guys, because maybe they're looking at the roster and they're thinking, man, we got a lot of holes. We got a lot of holes to fill. We need to rebuild this thing. You know, maybe they do take a shot at a Sam Darnold just to see, like, hey, can we build around this guy as we're filling in all the holes?
Yeah. So, and then our last question that we're going to take comes internationally, comes from Pascal in Germany. And we've touched on it a little bit, or he has a 2-part question, and we've touched on the first part, and that is, who do you think right now will be the starting quarterback for the Niners? And we've touched on that. But the second part of his question is interesting. How important is the loss of Robert Saleh going to be? So I'll start, because I've already said I think all signs point to Jimmy being the starter. So as of today, I would say Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the starter. As for how important Saleh, the loss of Saleh is going to be, I think is going to be determined on kind of the players that they sign, because a couple years ago, when the talent wasn't quite there, Saleh didn't look like the coach that he was last year that essentially got him the job with the Jets. And that was his players weren't smart. He didn't seem to make adjustments at halftime. Once he got, Richard Sherman a year into the program, he got Nick Bosa, he got, Fred Warner, playing all pro level linebacker. The defense looked really good. So how much his loss will affect the Niners, I think will be directly attributed to how much talent they're able to re-sign and give D'Amico Ryans. Because if they're able to bring back Verrett, I don't think it's going to be a huge step down. But I don't think D'Amico Ryans has shown yet that we haven't seen, can he make those halftime adjustments? What's going to happen when, a team is just running the same play over and over and gashing them, on the left side or with a certain play? Can he get into the locker room, make adjustments with his players and, correct things? So I think that's my thought on the effect of Saleh leaving.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to miss Saleh's attitude and motivational abilities on defense.
That's a good point. Yep.
But he wasn't a world beater in terms of play calling. I mean, he definitely got better as the years went along and as the talent improved as well. So I think there will be growing pains with D'Amico Ryans, just like there were with Saleh, because, you're once again handing over the reins to a coach who's never called plays before. And it's obviously different being in charge of the entire defense as opposed to just the linebackers. But hopefully with his experience, having played middle linebacker in the NFL and his impeccable work ethic, that'll shorten that learning curve. And hopefully guys like Fred Warner and Nick Bosa are still around and they can become more vocal leaders on the field, since they're losing Richard Sherman, who filled that role the past few years. So I don't think it's losing Saleh, as you mentioned, that'll hurt as much as the reshuffling of the roster and who the Niners will actually be having playing D next year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with both of you. I think they might lose or miss some of that rah-rah, all gas. Maybe D'Amico can do some of that. I'm not sure. Then also, like what Todd said, a couple of years ago, if you remember correctly, we're like, get rid of this Saleh guy. And then what happens? You add.
Who said that? Nobody said that.
Yeah, you did, I think, right? No, or Todd, right?
Everybody said that.
I definitely said it.
You add Bosa, you add some of these players. I mean, Saleh should be thanking Bosa for coming in last year and pretty much getting him this job this year, right? I mean, he's made some improvements. He's gotten better. We've all been frustrated with the lack of blitzing or lack of whatever. But, yeah, I mean, it's always tough when you lose somebody. But hopefully we get the players back, because the players are going to be what makes it,
Yep. And both of you, just for Pascal and the record, right now, who's the quarterback of the Niners game one this year?
I'm just going to say Deshaun, just to make it interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say Josh Rosen.
All right.
I'm just kidding. But what you said, Todd, that's why I didn't even touch on it. Jimmy, yeah. That's what I think.
Very good. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, thanks again to everyone who threw in questions. I really appreciate it. It's fun to hear from people, and we'll take questions as they come in. So feel free to hit us on Twitter at 3Side Sports Talk, or I'm sorry, at 3Side Sports on Twitter, and rate 3Side Sports Talk on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Go ahead and throw a question or a comment into your review, and we'll be happy to field that later on. One thing that came up yesterday was the breaking news that Tiger Woods had been in a car accident, and this is not a golf show, but it had me thinking as I was working from home, and I started getting text alerts, and CNN and every news organization broke into live coverage of Tiger Woods. It got me thinking of, where were you when type of situations related to sports, because it takes a pretty monumental event for kind of the world to stop for a sports story to jump in. And so I threw it out yesterday. What were some sports moments that just you remember exactly where you were when you heard or you saw or you listened to some kind of sporting event? I'll go ahead and kick it off just to show you where my head was. October 17th, 1989. Anyone? Real quick.
The earthquake.
Yeah.
The earthquake.
Loma Prieta.
So again, I was a freshman in high school at Moreau Catholic. We had just come off the football field. We were in the locker room. The World Series game was that night. I was jacked to go see, not to go see, but get home to see the A's and Giants play in the World Series. And all of a sudden, lockers started shaking, and you thought the linemen were just shaking lockers to create, havoc. And then everyone started yelling. All of a sudden, started seeing things fall and lights sway. So it's like, and then to go on that the World Series got canceled that night. So that was kind of where were you when, as it affected sports, because not only was I looking forward to the World Series, I had just come off the football, practice field. So that's one of those events that, definitely know exactly where I was at that moment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was getting ready to watch that World Series, and then things started shaking and rattling, and I had to dive underneath the kitchen table, and all of a sudden every plate and whatever bowl came crashing down out of the cupboard. So it was, that was crazy.
You got one? Where were you when?
Yeah, I mean, I got one. For me, it was just a year ago, January 26th, 2020, when we heard about Kobe Bryant's death. I was at my son's travel baseball practice, just chatting it up with some of the other dads, when I think someone said, "Oh my God, did you hear that Kobe died?" And of course, my initial reaction was one of disbelief, like, it must be some clickbait or, TMZ jumping the gun, and he's not actually dead. But it was crazy to find out that, he and his daughter and all those people aboard the helicopter crashed and died. And wow, little did we know that it was just a precursor to a tragic year of 2020.
Yep.
No, that's a good one. And I thought the same thing with Kobe. I was like, no, stop. Because you always hear that stuff. And it's like, no way. But why? Yeah. No way, I guess, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. You don't think that's going to happen, or you don't think that's going to be the news. Same with, So what you said about that other one, Todd, the earthquake, same thing. I have the same memory. And that's one of the first things I thought of as well when you mentioned that question was same thing. In the locker room, the lockers were swaying. And then that turned into, oh no, my mom's in the city and she rides BART. How do you need to find out some information here, right? Like, it was just what a disaster, right? And when you asked that question, I was like, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to remember because I think most of the times when there's a major sporting event, I'm not necessarily at the game, but watching it on TV. So like, that's where I would be, in my living room, jumping up and down with the kids or whatever. One I did remember, and I don't have like a super vivid memory of it, but it was the Hail Mary game from Doug Flutie. Back it was the Orange Bowl against Miami. And I don't even know how old I was. I can't remember what year it was, but I remember it because my mom's told me about it a lot. Like rooting for Miami and being a Miami fan for some reason. Completed that pass. Instead of being like on his side, I guess I laid on the living room floor, like crying in disbelief for like, I don't know how long, upset that he pulled that off and that Miami lost. So that's just one thing that kind of sticks with me, just because I remember my mom told me about it so many times, but not really any care about Miami or Boston College anymore, but just the shock of that, I guess. And I don't know how old I was. I mean, 5, 6 years old. I don't even know.
I think it was 1984. So probably college football season of 1984. So you're 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
I got two others. In one of them is November 18th, 1985. And I know this because it was the very last Monday Night Football game I forgot about. Like, since then, I know when Monday Night Football is. Like, I know what time it starts. I am watching it. I am listening to it. I am tracking it, just because I love the NFL. But on that day, for whatever reason, I had lost track of time. I was not watching Monday Night Football. And any idea the game?
Was that the Theismann leg game?
Yes, that was Joe Theismann
Wow.
breaking his leg. And again, obviously this was way before cell phones and computers and whatnot, that my dad's friend had called the house and saying, "Did you just see that?" Type of thing. And I'm like, "Saw what?" I'm like, "Oh my God, we're missing the football game," not knowing what had happened. But that was one of those things that I totally forgot about it. And I now know that I just don't miss Monday Night Football, but I remember missing that game for no reason. So that was one of them. And the other one, Jerry, November 20th, 2005.
Yes. Is this when Joe Thornton was traded to the Sharks?
That is absolutely correct. It was the night of November 20th. Jerry and I were working for an event, and I don't know if we had cell phones that provided text alerts or how we got it, but I remember that night, Joe Thornton getting traded to the hometown Sharks and being unbelievable that a player of that stature was coming to the hometown. And I remember you and I going to that very next home game to see Joe Thornton. So again, those are just kind of moments where were you when this happened? Because I agree with you, Jeff. Most of the time, like when I was thinking about this, most of the time I'm watching, in my living, Tyree catch the ball against his helmet, or, Dwight Clark make the catch, or whatever the event is. Most of the time, it's exactly right. I'm in my living room, or I'm sitting on the couch, or I'm at the bar, or whatever. But these just happen to be events that happened, and I'm like, kind of came out of nowhere and broke the news. So those were a couple of things for me.
Yeah, good.
Any other ones?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, the other one would be just the OJ Simpson chase, right? Yeah. You're watching the Knicks Rockets game, 1994, June, and you're just like, what the heck is going on? And it's just like, again, something that you're just not seeing, never seen before. Like, seriously, like this is real. This isn't just like some movie of these cops chasing this white Bronco. And then you're hearing all these stories like, OJ Simpson is being driven by his best friend and they're trying to flee and he's in the back. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, that definitely is one of those where the news, they broke, every station broke into it, and you knew and you remember where you were when OJ and Al Cowlings were in the white Bronco, being chased. So anyways, all right. Well, from all accounts, Tiger was in a pretty rough accident, couple broken legs and shattered ankle. And, who knows what the future holds for him outside of he's going to live, which, is probably the best thing you can say after seeing that wreckage. But, that would be one of those things that at some point in 10, 15, 20 years, you might remember. I remember where I was when I heard Tiger, got into that accident. So anyways, moving on. Final thoughts. Jerry, what do you got?
I'm not sure if you want to revisit any more Deshaun stuff. I don't know if we've already Deshauned out, but I do remember last week during our podcast, you astutely brought up a rule that I wasn't aware of in terms of how far into the future teams were allowed to trade their future draft picks, which apparently is 3 years worth of picks, including the current year that we're in. So I did go back into the lab and I worked out a new plan on how to get Deshaun, but I don't know, into the Niners red and gold, but I don't know if that's something you want to wait till our next episode.
No, give
a nice little tease for the next episode.
Go with it.
Give it to us. Then we can marinate on it. We can let the listeners chime in, but you've been pretty good when you've gone into the lab to come up with them. So let's hear what the professor has to say.
So first of all, so these things all need to happen. Okay. So first of all, Deshaun's just really got to put that no trade clause to good use, right? And tell Houston he's only got eyes for San Francisco, like your buddy Carson Wentz told Philly, in terms of he's only going to go to Indy, right? Secondly, from everything I've heard out of New England, from Mike Reese of ESPN Boston to Tony Maserati of 98.5 The Sports Hub. The Patriots want Jimmy G back. And I mean, they want him back bad, right? So the Niners got to leverage that. Okay. And third, what I've learned is an additional wrinkle to that rule that you mentioned about trading future draft picks. So according to the league office, trades conducted before the draft begins can only include the draft picks in 2021, 2022, and 2023, like you pointed out. However, once the draft officially begins, it's my understanding that trades can also include picks from 2024. I'm not sure why that is, but that's apparently the rule.
Okay.
So here's how it goes down. John Lynch tells Belichick, dude, I know you still have the hots for Jimmy, but I can't part with him without getting a first round pick because I need it in order to get to Sean. And Belichick's like, well, what do you have in mind, Johnny? And then Lynch goes, well, how about I give you Jimmy and my gold Hall of Fame jacket? And then Belichick goes, you keep your jacket because I'll get my own very soon. But you throw in a third rounder this year and next, along with Jimmy, and I'll give you my first. Okay, so now Lynch has 2 first rounders this year, ours and the Patriots, and then we package both those picks with our firsts in 2022, 2023, and 2024. That's 5 first rounders plus Eric Armstead, and we and Nick Caserio, Bill Belichick, and John Lynch agreed to those parameters before the draft, but then they announced the deal as soon as the draft begins on April 29th.
All right. I mean,
very interesting. How do we jump from 3 and Eric to 5 and Eric? What?
My whole plan this whole time was to overwhelm the Texans with the 5. And I'm not sure if you guys saw the Peter King proposal, sending like Fred Warner, Mike McGlinchey, and Jimmy Garoppolo along with first round picks this year and next, and second round pick, and like that's a lot of pain up front. I'm trying to spread the pain out into the future rather than taking the blow, immediately like Peter King's proposal.
all right. Well, I'm gonna marinate on that, and I'll have my reaction next week. So, Jeff, do you have final thoughts?
Let's see. Final thoughts. Well, one thing I kept seeing lately in the news cycle is, I don't know if it was today or was it yesterday. It was this whole thing with the Redskins. Yes, I will say it. What is their deal? I saw something that said they're going to pick a new name in 2022 now. Why do you need 2 years to come up with a new name? Just if you're going to change your name, then just change the name, because nothing really has happened any different in my mind right now from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You've never wanted to change the name, so just leave it as the Redskins. But if you have to change the name and you don't want to go with the Redskins anymore, Red Tails I've seen, Red Hawks I've seen, something else, Metropolitans, but just pick one and go with it. Why are you waiting until 2022?
Two words: marketing and merchandising.
Pick a color.
Need to make sure they get it right, and clearly they haven't gotten a lot right inside that building. So my guess is they just need more time.
But it just seems so silly. Like there's no pressure from Goodell. I mean, pick a name. Like, this is silly. Just pick a name already. Right. And then it comes out that Alex Smith is like, well, hey, by the way, they didn't want me there. And that just kind of made me wonder what the hell was going on with that. Right. You don't have a quarterback, and now you're telling him we don't want him there when he's under contract. He got hurt for your team. And now we're like, oh, we don't want you here anyway. Like, the whole thing is just kind of weird with the Washington football team. Go ahead.
Well, maybe they're trying to make that a thing. Maybe they're trying to make Washington football team a thing. Like, the Ohio State University was just Ohio State University 15 years ago. All of a sudden it became the Ohio State University, and Miami University was just Miami University. But then it became the U after just hearing it over. Maybe Washington is just trying to make Washington WFT a thing. That
I mean, they're going to see if it has legs beyond
trying to make sure
even
it has
like next year. So then they'll just say, we're just going to stick with this.
Right.
I just it was just took me back when I saw that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Gee, we're not even to next football season yet, which starts, what'd you say, like March 17th? Like the official, are you still gonna wait till 22 now? I mean, come on, figure it out.
Yes.
And as far as Alex Smith, I didn't read that article. I just kind of saw the headline, but I don't know. I guess it's understandable. I mean, the dude, I mean, speaking of Joe Theismann, you're just talking about Joe Theismann. I mean, I'm sure they're like, we don't want to see that again.
Yes.
Right. I'm sure they were scared out of their whatever.
Yeah, to be fair,
if they had to play him, you know.
I haven't read the article either. It just was funny to hear him say they didn't want me here. I'm thinking, with all that's going on with your head coach going through his cancer treatment and you're rehabbing your ankle, foot, leg, and then they're like, oh, we don't want you here anyway. Oh, are you going to go with Dwayne Haskins? You just released this guy. So what are you guys doing? It doesn't make any sense.
So, all right. Well, as we're up against time, I'll shorten my final thoughts just to circle back to what is my current Zoom background, which everyone can see on the YouTube channel, and that being the ending of the Miracle on Ice game, the 1980 Winter Olympics. And to kind of tie this into a bow, how Jeff was talking about how his mom told him all about how, upset he was when Doug Flutie completed that pass against Miami. I was, 4 or 5 years old when these Olympics came around. But to hear my parents tell the story is I was completely encapsulated with the Winter Olympics and seeing hockey and luge and bobsled and skiing. Like I don't know what it was, but to hear them tell the story, that would just had my eyes glued constantly to the TV to watch the Olympics. So, and it whether that is the reason, I just think that the 1980 Miracle on Ice team probably continues to be the greatest sports story that we can ever have or we've ever had. So to commemorate the closing ceremonies of the 1980 Olympics, which happened on this day, but 41 years ago, feel old, gentlemen, the 1980 Olympic team gets the honor of being the Zoom background for today. So that would be my final thoughts. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. I found it, fun to interact with the listeners. We're going to continue to do that. So we'll continue sending in those questions, especially as we get closer to free agency and more rumors hit the news cycle. Also, we may have a special guest joining us next week, which would be a first for this show. But no doubt someone who I think can, kind of be entertaining and insightful and provide a little bit of a insight into sports without being, as a player. So we're gonna work out the details between his people and see if we can get him on the show next week. So for Todd and Jerry and Jeff, like us on podcast or Apple Podcasts, write a review, leave a question, follow us on Twitter at 3Side Sports. Again, thank you to everyone listening, downloading, subscribing, and liking. Good night.